In 2021, a journalist's phone was hacked while it was sitting locked on a table. He didn't click any link. He didn't download any suspicious app. He didn't even touch the phone. And by the time anyone figured out what happened, every message he'd ever sent, every call he'd ever made, and every move he'd ever made had already been recorded and sent to someone else. That's where we're starting today. Because that story isn't just about one journalist. It's about a piece of software that could be on your phone right now, and you'd have absolutely no way of knowing. Here are the 10 darkest scandals in smartphone history. Pegasus spyware, the hack that requires 0 clicks. The software is called Pegasus, and it was built by an Israeli company called NSO Group. What makes Pegasus different from every other virus or malware you've heard of is something called a 0-click attack. Normally, to get hacked, you need to do something. Click a bad link, open a sketchy file, install a fake app. But Pegasus doesn't need any of that. It can silently inject itself into your device just by sending you an iMessage or WhatsApp message. You don't even need to open it. Once it's in, your phone becomes a complete surveillance device. Pegasus can read every text and email, listen in on phone calls, activate your camera and microphone at any time, track your GPS location in real time, and here's the part that makes encryption apps like Signal completely useless. It reads messages directly off your screen before they're encrypted. So it doesn't break the encryption, it simply bypasses it entirely. In 2021, the Pegasus Project, a global investigation involving 17 media organizations, revealed that more than 50,000 phone numbers worldwide had been targeted. The list included journalists, human rights activists, heads of state, and billionaires. Jeff Bezos is believed to have been hacked through a WhatsApp message sent from the personal account of the Saudi Crown Prince. NSO Group insists they only sell to governments for legitimate law enforcement purposes. But the investigation found evidence of the software being used to target dissidents and journalists in countries with authoritarian governments. The reason this matters for you specifically, Pegasus-style 0-click exploits don't stay exclusive for long. Once the technique is known, other groups reverse engineer it. Cybersecurity researchers at Citizen Lab found evidence of Pegasus infections on devices running the latest versions of iOS and Android. There is no fully effective defense. The most you can do is keep your software updated and hope the latest patch covers whatever exploit is being used this week. Samsung Galaxy Note 7, the phone that literally exploded. In August 2016, Samsung launched the Galaxy Note 7 to enormous praise. Great display, improved S Pen, premium build. Pre-orders sold out within days. Then the phone started catching fire. Not 1 or 2 units, hundreds. A man in Florida woke up to find his Jeep completely burned out because he left his Note 7 on the seat overnight. A child in Brooklyn suffered hand burns when the phone exploded while she was using it. Hotels started putting up signs asking guests not to charge Note 7 devices in their rooms. Then airlines started banning it entirely. All major U.S. carriers, then international ones, then the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission issued an official federal recall. The cause was a design flaw in the battery. To fit a larger battery into a slimmer body, Samsung engineered it with tolerances that were too tight. The internal electrode layers made contact with each other under pressure, causing short circuits and thermal runaway, which is the technical term for uncontrollable fire that gets worse the hotter it gets. Samsung recalled the entire first batch, 2.5 million units, and replaced them with new ones. Then the replacement units started catching fire too. Samsung had no choice but to kill the product entirely, issuing a global stop-use order just 52 days after launch. Total cost? An estimated $5.3 billion. The Note brand was effectively put on ice for years, and Samsung had to start from scratch, rebuilding consumer trust. The uncomfortable lesson here is that the race to make phones thinner and more powerful has real physical consequences. And when a company prioritizes design benchmarks over engineering margins, you're the one holding the device when it goes wrong. Benchmark cheating, You paid for performance that doesn't exist. When you watch a phone review, there's almost always a benchmark section, running apps like Geekbench or Antutu to measure the chip's performance score. Higher score, faster phone. Simple enough. Except it isn't, because multiple major phone manufacturers have been caught rigging those numbers. Here's how it worked. Samsung, Huawei, OnePlus, and others quietly programmed their phones to detect when a benchmark app was being run. The moment the phone recognized a benchmark application by name, it would force the CPU and GPU to run at 100% capacity to maximize the score. But during normal use, gaming, browsing, streaming, the phone would run at significantly lower performance to save battery and manage heat. The trick was discovered by researchers at AnandTech, who simply renamed popular benchmark apps to random strings. The scores dropped immediately, in some cases by 20 to 30%. The phones were recognizing the apps by name and performing specifically for the test. It wasn't a performance mode, it was a performance theater. OnePlus was eventually removed from benchmark leaderboards. Samsung acknowledged the behavior in some of its devices. Huawei stayed quiet. What this means for you: if you ever bought a phone partly based on benchmark scores you saw in a review, and almost everyone who follows tech has, those numbers may not reflect the phone you actually received. The real-world performance in your pocket is slower than what was advertised. That's not a bug. It was a deliberate choice. Apple Parts Pairing, the repair trap. Imagine buying a car, and if you ever take it to an independent mechanic instead of the official dealership, the car automatically disables the air conditioning and shows a warning light on your dashboard. That sounds absurd, but that is almost exactly what Apple has been doing with iPhones for years. Apple assigns a unique serial number to each individual component inside an iPhone. The screen, the battery, the camera, even the Face ID sensor. That serial number is cryptographically paired to the main chip of that specific device. If you take a 100% genuine Apple screen from one iPhone and install it in another iPhone with a cracked display, same model, same part, same manufacturer, the phone will display a warning. Unable to verify this iPhone has a genuine Apple display. You lose True Tone color calibration, automatic brightness adjustment, and on older models, Face ID entirely. Apple's official position is that this protects against counterfeit parts. But the policy applies equally to authentic Apple components. A screen pulled from one iPhone 13 and installed into another iPhone 13 triggers the same warnings as a fake screen from a third-party supplier. The practical effect is straightforward. Independent repair shops can't fully fix your phone anymore, even with real Apple parts. Your only option for a warning-free repair is Apple's own service, where a screen replacement starts at $279 for an iPhone 13 Pro, compared to around $80 to $120 at a reputable independent shop. Apple's repair revenue is estimated at over $4.9 billion annually. Parts pairing is one of the key mechanisms protecting that number. The right to repair movement has pushed back hard on this practice, and some U.S. states have begun passing legislation to address it. But for now, if your screen cracks, Apple has made sure you'll feel the consequences of going anywhere else. The charger hypocrisy: saving the planet or saving margins. In 2020, Apple announced they were removing the charger from the iPhone box. The stated reason was environmental responsibility. Fewer chargers manufactured means less mining, less waste, less carbon. A noble cause. Then they started selling a 20-watt USB-C charger separately for $19. Think about the actual chain of events here. A person who doesn't already have a compatible charger now needs to order one separately. That charger ships in its own box, with its own packaging materials, in its own delivery van, from its own warehouse. Instead of one shipment containing a phone and its charger, there are now two shipments. More packaging total, more carbon total, more trips total. The environmental math doesn't hold up, but the financial math does. Apple saves an estimated $6 per unit by removing the charger. Multiply that by iPhone annual sales of roughly 230 million units per year, and that's approximately $1.4 billion in cost savings per year, reclassified as environmental virtue. Samsung, Xiaomi, and others followed suit within a year, citing the same environmental rationale. None of them reduced the phone's price to reflect the missing accessory. This one is less of a scandal and more of a masterclass in corporate messaging. They found a way to cut costs, increase accessory revenue, and get praise for it. You have to respect the audacity, even if you're the one who paid for it. Huawei and the Google ban, when geopolitics kills a brand. In May 2019, the U.S. Department of Commerce added Huawei to the Entity List, effectively a trade blacklist. The official reason was national security. U.S. officials alleged that Huawei's devices contained backdoors capable of transmitting user data to the Chinese government. Huawei denied this, and no backdoor was ever publicly demonstrated in a verified technical audit. But the denial didn't matter. Google was legally required to cut ties. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Huawei lost access to Android updates. New Huawei phones could no longer include the Google Play Store, Gmail, YouTube, or Google Maps. In markets outside China, where virtually every app ecosystem runs through Google services, this was a death sentence for consumer sales. In 2019, Huawei was the second largest smartphone brand in the world, having overtaken Apple. By 2021, their global market share had collapsed from around 19% to under 4%. The flagship P and Mate series, phones that had genuinely competed with, and in some categories beaten, Samsung and Apple, disappeared from international shelves. Huawei built a parallel app ecosystem called App Gallery, but it never came close to matching Google Play's catalog. The company has pivoted heavily toward enterprise and infrastructure business. The lesson here isn't really about Huawei specifically. It's that no matter how technically capable your product is, a single political decision made in Washington can erase a decade of market building overnight. That's a risk that sits in the foundation of the entire global tech industry. iPhone 6 Bendgate, the phone that bent in your pocket. When Apple launched the iPhone 6 Plus in 2014, they were proud of how thin it was. 7.1 millimeters, the slimmest iPhone at that point. A few weeks after launch, users started posting photos of their phones bent into a visible curve. Not from dropping them, not from sitting on them intentionally, just from being in a front jeans pocket during a normal day. The engineering failure came from two things combining badly. The aluminum alloy Apple chose was relatively soft, and the points of greatest structural stress happened to align exactly with the cutouts for the volume buttons and the SIM tray slot on the side of the phone. Those cutouts remove material at precisely the spots where bending force concentrates. When you sit down with the phone in your pocket, your thigh exerts steady pressure right at those weak points, and the phone curves permanently. Apple's initial response was that this was normal for metal devices and happened in only 9 reported cases. That answer angered people far more than the original defect. The hashtag Bendgate spread globally. Consumer Reports conducted independent bend tests that confirmed the problem. Apple eventually ran a silent repair program, but never officially acknowledged a design defect. The long-term damage was worse. The bending caused the Touch IC chips to slowly separate from the motherboard over time, eventually resulting in a condition users called touch disease. The screen becoming partially or fully unresponsive, with a gray flickering bar appearing at the top. Apple eventually settled a class action lawsuit over touch disease in 2018, paying out to affected users. No public apology was ever issued. The Green Line Nightmare, a bug that arrives right on schedule. This isn't history. This is happening right now to people who own current generation phones. Starting around 2022 and continuing through today, thousands of users across Samsung Galaxy S20, S21, and S22 devices, and iPhone 12, 13, and 14 Pro models began reporting the same symptom, a permanent vertical line, usually green or pink, appearing on the display. It never goes away. No restart, no software fix removes it. The technical explanation is likely related to the ribbon cable connecting the OLED panel, which can develop microfractures from repeated thermal expansion and contraction over time. But what's made this story gain traction is a pattern that's hard to ignore. A disproportionate number of cases appear either just after the warranty expires or immediately after a software update. Neither Samsung nor Apple has officially acknowledged this as a manufacturing defect or issued a proactive replacement program. Repairs typically run $200 to $350 out of warranty, which is close to the value of some of the affected devices. Whether the timing is genuinely coincidental or reflects something more deliberate remains unproven. But if you own one of the affected models and your screen develops a green line tomorrow, you'll be paying full repair price for a failure that appeared to have nothing to do with anything you did. LG Boot Loop, the death they tried to hide. LG used to be a serious player in Android. The G4 and V10 were legitimately well-reviewed phones. Excellent cameras, thoughtful design, good build quality. Users loved them. Then, starting in 2015, those phones started dying in a very specific way. Owners would pick up their phone one morning and find it stuck in a continuous restart loop. Booting to the LG logo, restarting, booting again, never reaching the home screen. This became known as the boot loop of death. The cause was a manufacturing defect in the BGA solder joints, the tiny solder balls that connect the main processor to the motherboard. As the phone heated up during normal use and cooled down again repeatedly over months, those solder joints experienced thermal stress, cracked, and eventually lost contact entirely. The phone couldn't start because the chip wasn't reliably connected to anything. What makes this a scandal rather than just a defect is what LG did next. Nothing. For months, LG support representatives told affected users the problem was caused by user error, voiding their warranties and refusing repairs. Internal communications later revealed in litigation showed LG was aware of the defect during this period. A class action lawsuit was eventually filed in the US. LG settled, offering affected users a repair, replacement, or partial refund depending on circumstances. The settlement fund was capped at $7 million, modest for a company of LG's size, and far less than the total number of affected devices would suggest was warranted. LG exited the smartphone business entirely in April 2021. The boot loop scandal wasn't the only reason, but it was a significant contributor to the trust collapse that made recovery impossible. Vertu, charging $1 million for a 3-year-old chip. We'll end with something that's less of a corporate betrayal and more of a philosophical question about what a product actually is. Vertu was a luxury phone brand, originally a Nokia subsidiary, later sold off and independently operated. Their phones ranged in price from around $6,000 to over $300,000 for custom diamond-encrusted models. They used genuine crocodile leather, surgical-grade steel, and sapphire crystal displays. Every phone came with a dedicated concierge service, a real human, available 24/7, who would book your restaurant tables, arrange private jet transfers, and handle whatever requests came with that income bracket. The problem was what was inside. While the exterior was genuinely premium, the internal hardware was consistently 3 to 4 generations behind current flagship specs. Vertu phones used older Snapdragon processors, lower RAM, and mediocre camera systems. Hardware that mid-range phones from Samsung or Xiaomi, priced at $300 to $400, regularly outperformed. A $500 phone from 2023 could process photos faster, run apps more smoothly, and handle security updates better than a Vertu costing 200 times more. Vertu's defense, implicit, never stated, was that they weren't selling technology. They were selling membership in a class. The phone was jewelry, not a computer. And technically, that's not fraud. No one was deceived about the specs. But when a product positions itself as a phone, markets itself as premium, and charges premium phone prices. Selling a product with last-generation internals at a 10,000% markup occupies a very specific space between luxury and exploitation, especially when the buyers are often people with more money than familiarity with what those specs actually mean. Vertu went bankrupt twice, in 2017 and again in 2018. A fitting end, perhaps, for a product that was always more illusion than substance. So those are the 10 darkest scandals in smartphone history. From phones that explode, to spyware that doesn't need you to do anything at all, to companies that build entire revenue models around making your repair as expensive as possible. The common thread across almost all of these isn't incompetence. It's the calculation that most consumers won't look closely enough to notice, or won't have enough leverage to do anything about it even if they do. That calculation is usually right, but it's slightly less right every time someone decides to pay attention.